Let's now discuss this further and the possible impact of Bester's escape on his victims. We are now joined via Zoom by clinical psychologist, Dr. Keitumetse Mashego. Dr. Mashego, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Of course, this must be, no doubt, a very traumatic experience, especially for the victims of Thabo Bester. Talk to us about what possibly could have been going through their minds when earlier last month we found out, that he indeed had escaped prison and that he was roaming the streets of Johannesburg as if he was not a convicted rapist and murderer.
The victims are likely suffering a lot of, psychological distress, a lot of anxiety. I can imagine even re-victimization and re-traumatization. It's almost like they're reliving the whole incident again for what happened to them. But also there's this term called secondary traumatization. So just being re-traumatized from hearing other people's stories. So it's likely that they are experiencing a whole lot of emotions and turmoil, because now not only do they escape, but it means they're back now and it's always in the media. And also, the failure of the system to protect them, because these people are escaped from prison.
And now let's just going back to Thabo Bester himself. I mean, of course, a lot has come out of the man himself, even though he comes by many aliases. We don't even know if that is indeed his name, as officials have also alluded to. But when one was watching, just some of the interviews that he's held, even that psycho-evaluation interview when he was first imprisoned, talking about the fact that, he's not really guilty of rape and murder. What he is guilty of perhaps is, falsifying his name to some of his victims, and maybe in the case of that murder, for instance, saying that the only thing he's guilty of was perhaps bringing the knife, to the scene. Just what kind of a person would you think that he is? Just listening to that interview. I mean, this is a convicted serial rapist and murderer.
Yeah, it's sad, when people present with such severe pathology, it's because they're usually presenting with antisocial personality disorders, or narcissism also included in that. And, people like that are very manipulative. They have no remorse. They do not take responsibility for their actions, and everything is always about them. And the lies are endless. So you can imagine just the type of person he is, and also the victims reliving this, right? Because they probably had different names from this character, or Thabo Bester, as we know him. But there's many things that have been triggered, because probably the victims now are imagining, the worst case scenario that could have happened to them, sadly.
What role do you think his girlfriend, Dr. Nandipha Magudumana, plays in all of this? I mean, a lot of people very divided in terms of, is she also a victim? Is she also a narcissist? Could she perhaps have also orchestrated to some of the crimes that we've seen of late? What do you make of her role?
It's very difficult to say, but from what we are seeing is that there is likely a personality disorder within her. She seems so far removed from her emotions. If you look at, for example, the story with the children, the two little girls. So it shows that she's so far dissociated from her emotions, which is a typical trait for people with personality disorders. So she might come across as a victim, but because of the manipulative nature of Bester, but she herself could have certain traits, right? Similar to Thabo. It's just maybe Thabo has been in the game longer. But I think for both of them, they seem like people who are deeply, sick in terms of from a psychiatric point of view. So they need, and these type of people, the prognosis is usually very poor, which is very sad for the victims. So they might never actually get the forgiveness or them to take responsibility for their actions. So it's on the victim's shoulders to actually seek the help they need to overcome the trauma continually. And some of them might have to do this for life, just because of things that are playing out, the narrative that's playing out around this case.
You mentioned Dr. Makudumani's children. You know, what could possibly be going on in their world? I mean, not only has their mother been arrested in such a high-profile manner, but also her father, you know, Mr. Zolile Sikelele, has also been arrested, and he's behind bars for murder too. You know, these are very serious crimes. What could possibly be, you know, happening in the lives of those poor children and also the rest of the family at this point?
They must be experiencing a lot of trauma. I mean, the children have a love relationship, and now they might be also that love and hate relationship for the mother, right? I love my mom, but I hate what she has done. So it's very confusing, and it can cause a lot of trauma within a child, which often displays in their adulthood, in their adult lives. So it's very sad to see, you know, the narrative play out the way it's playing, and also for them it will be difficult to trust. Now, who do they trust? I mean, grandpa is arrested, mom is arrested, and you know, there's a lot of things happening around, and we don't know really who is involved. So for them, it might also create, you know, deep-rooted psychopathology just because of what is going on around it, and it might also just, you know. There's a cause for concern in that, you know, they need the help, all the help they need just to be safe, but also for the trauma they're experiencing currently.
All right, Dr. Mashego, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate you coming through. Clinical psychologist there, Dr. Keitumetse Mashego, really unpacking what some of the victims, you know, are going through in this Bester escape saga.